daughter called me at 6:47 in the morning to tell me she'd already transferred the business into her husband's name. Not asked. Told. I was standing in the kitchen of the house I'd built in 1987, the same kitchen where I'd taught her to make biscuits from scratch, where she'd sat across from me doing homework while I reviewed contracts after dinner. I had just poured my first cup of coffee. The mug was still warm in my hand when she said it. "Dad, it was the right move. You're not well. You needed someone stable managing things." I set the cup down on the counter, slowly. "The way you do when you're deciding whether to speak or to think first?" "Sweetheart," I said, "I haven't agreed to any transfer." "You didn't have to," she said. "You gave me authority. 3 years ago, after my bypass surgery, my daughter had sat beside my hospital bed with forms I hadn't asked for. Her eyes were red. Her voice was gentle. She'd said she just wanted to protect me, that if anything happened again, she needed to be able to act quickly. I'd signed without reading every line. You do that sometimes when someone you love is crying and you're still connected to a heart monitor. I asked her what she meant by stable. "Lawrence understands business," she said. "He has connections. He can grow what you built." I had founded Mercer Industrial Supply 31 years ago from a rented garage in Knoxville with $11,000 in one commercial account with a highway contractor named Beaufort who paid 30 days late. I had grown it to 47 employees, 3 distribution warehouses, and contracts across 6 states. I had survived 2 recessions, a flood that took out our Chattanooga facility, and a supply chain collapse in 2020 that would have killed most operations our size. Lawrence had never run anything larger than a fantasy football league. "I'll call you back," I said. "Dad." I ended the call. The coffee had gone cold. I didn't drive to a lawyer's office that morning. I drove to the office. My office, the one with a framed photograph of the original crew, 4 guys and a borrowed forklift still hanging behind the door. Sandra at the front desk looked surprised to see me. I told her good morning and walked straight to the back. Everything looked the same. The files, the whiteboards, the industrial shelving catalogs stacked beside the copier. But when I sat down at my desk and opened the system, my administrator access was gone. I stared at the login screen for a long moment. Then I drove to see my attorney. Her name is Beverly. She'd been handling my business matters for 19 years. Short, precise, the kind of woman who asks the same question twice if she doesn't like the first answer. When I walked in without an appointment, she told her assistant to hold her calls. I explained what had happened. She listened without interrupting, which is unusual for her. When I finished, she took off her reading glasses. "Show me what you signed." The document was 12 pages. The relevant section was on page 9. I had granted my daughter a durable power of attorney. Broad in scope. Financial, medical, operational. What I had not done, what no one had apparently told Lawrence, was transfer ownership of the business itself. A power of attorney allows someone to act on your behalf. It does not make them you. Beverly looked up from the document. "The business is still held in your name alone?" "Always has been," I said. "I looked at restructuring it as an LLC a few years back, never finished the paperwork." She nodded slowly. "Then any transfer would require your direct signature on a properly executed assignment agreement, which she cannot produce." I leaned back in the chair. She believes she already transferred it. Beverly's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "Then she's wrong. Or she was misled." She paused. "Or she's hoping you won't push back." My phone vibrated on the desk between us. My son-in-law. I declined it. "There's more," I said. 2 weeks before her call, I'd noticed something odd in the business accounts. Not dramatic. Small, the way problems usually start. A vendor payment routed through an account I didn't recognize. An expense code I hadn't authorized. I'd mentioned it to my accountant, a careful man named White who had been with me for 11 years, and he'd started pulling the records quietly. Dwight's preliminary report was sitting in Beverly's printer by 10:15 that morning. Over the previous 4 months, 11 transactions had moved money out of Mercer Industrial Supply into a holding company registered in Delaware under a name I'd never heard. The total was just over $216,000. The signatory on each transaction was my daughter. acting under the power of attorney I'd signed in the hospital. Beverly read through the report without speaking. Then she set it down and looked at me across the desk. "Your son-in-law," she said carefully. "What do you know about his finances?" I knew more than I'd let on. 6 months ago, a man I'd done business with for years mentioned at a charity dinner that Lawrence had approached him about an investment opportunity. The man had passed. He described it as aggressive projections and thin margins. A few weeks later, I had heard from another contact that Lawrence was in a disagreement with a former business partner over unpaid obligations. I hadn't said anything to my daughter. I'd been watching. "He has a cash problem," I said. Beverly nodded. "And your daughter has access to your cash." My phone vibrated again, my daughter this time. I turned it face down. Beverly pulled out a legal pad. "Here's where we are. The business transfer your daughter believes occurred is not valid. No assignment was executed. The power of attorney doesn't accomplish what she thinks it does." She paused. "The wire transfers, however, are more complicated. She had authorized access. She used it. Whether that constitutes misuse depends on the intent and how the funds were applied." "Where did the money go?" I asked. She slid the report back toward me and pointed to a single line. "The Delaware Holding Company had a registered agent in Nashville. The agent was linked to a property development LLC. That LLC listed one managing member, Lawrence." I sat with that for a moment, not because I was surprised, because I needed to be clear before I decided anything. My daughter is my only child. Her mother passed 11 years ago. It has been the two of us since then. Holidays and Sunday dinners and the kind of phone calls that don't have a particular subject. I had been proud of her. I still was, underneath everything. But pride and protection are different things. "What are my options?" I said. Beverly picked up her pen. "Several. You can revoke the power of attorney immediately. That stops any further action under her authority. You can file a complaint with the Tennessee Department of Commerce regarding the unauthorized business transfer attempt. You can pursue civil recovery for the transferred funds. And depending on what we find in the next layer of records, you may have grounds for a criminal referral for financial exploitation of an elderly person." The last phrase landed oddly. I'm 63. I don't think of myself as elderly. But the law has its own definitions. "Start with the revocation," I said, "and the business records. I want everything documented." By noon, my phone showed 14 missed calls. My daughter, my son-in-law, a number I didn't recognize that turned out, when Beverly's assistant ran it, to be a Nashville attorney's office. I listened to one voicemail. My daughter's voice, strained in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager and had gotten herself into something she couldn't fix alone. "Dad, whatever Beverly is telling you, please just talk to me first." Lawrence explained everything. This was supposed to simplify things. "We were going to tell you. Just please call me back." I noted the word, supposed, past tense. I deleted the message. Dwight spent the afternoon pulling the complete transaction history. By 4 o'clock, the picture was clearer and uglier than the morning version. Lawrence's development project had stalled in permitting. His original investors had started asking uncomfortable questions. The money moved out of Mercer Industrial hadn't been an investment or a loan. It had been a patch, used to cover operating costs on a project that was bleeding. He had used my business to buy himself time. Beverly filed the power of attorney revocation at 4:37 that afternoon with the county clerk. She sent certified copies to my bank, my accountant, and the business's registered agent. She also sent a formal cease and desist to Lawrence's Nashville attorney advising that any claim to Mercer Industrial Supply was without legal basis and would be contested. My phone buzzed again at 5:12. 22 missed calls. I drove home, heated up soup from the refrigerator, sat in the chair by the window where I usually read and didn't open a book. I thought about the last several months, the way my daughter had started calling more often, checking in more than usual. I'd thought it was concern, post-surgery anxiety that hadn't quite resolved. I'd been touched by it, honestly. I told her she didn't need to worry, that I was doing fine, that the cardiologist was pleased with my progress. She'd said she was glad. She'd said she just wanted to make sure I was protected. I understood now what she'd been measuring. Not my health, my availability, how present I was, how much I was paying attention. She had miscalculated. The next morning, I arrived at Beverly's office at 7:30. She was already there. She had 3 additional documents ready and a contact name at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit. We did not immediately call them. Instead, at 9 o'clock, Beverly called my daughter's cell phone. She identified herself, stated that she represented me, and outlined in precise professional language exactly what we had found: the invalid transfer attempt, the $216,000 moved under the power of attorney, and the connection to Lawrence's holding company. She gave my daughter 1 hour to respond. At 9:48, my daughter called Beverly's direct line. She came alone. No attorney, no Lawrence. She arrived at Beverly's office just before 11, wearing the kind of expression I recognized from 30 years ago when she'd done something she couldn't talk her way out of. She had her mother's eyes, and, in that moment, her mother's stubbornness replaced by something more brittle. She sat across from us and looked at me. "You could have just talked to me," she said. "You could have talked to me before any of this started," I said. She looked down at the table. "Lawrence said it would be fine, that the POA covered it, that by the time you found out, the project would have turned around and the money would be back. He was wrong. I know that now." Beverly slid a document across the table. "This is a full accounting of the transferred funds and a demand for restitution. It also outlines the grounds for a criminal complaint under Tennessee Code Annotated 71-6120, financial exploitation of an adult." My daughter's jaw tightened. "You're going to have me arrested." "I'm going to have me arrested." "I'm going to have options," I said quietly. "What happens next depends on you." Her eyes filled, not with the calculated softness I'd seen in some of the voicemails. Something rawer. "Dad, I was scared. After the surgery, you looked diminished. You looked like you were fading. Lawrence said you needed someone to take the wheel before you drove everything into the ground. I thought you thought I was done," I said. She didn't answer, which was its own answer. "I built that company while raising you alone after your mother died," I said. Not harshly, just clearly. "I kept it running through 2008, through COVID. I survived heart surgery and came back to the office before my cardiologist wanted me to. I am not diminished." The word sat in the room. "I know," she whispered. "I'm not sure you did. Not then." She pressed her hands flat on the table. "What do you want from me?" Beverly spoke first. "Full written disclosure of every transaction made under the power of attorney, cooperation with our accounting review, and a notarized acknowledgement that no transfer of Mercer Industrial Supply occurred or was authorized." My daughter looked at me. "And you? What do you want?" I thought about it. "Genuinely, I want to know if this was your idea or his." A long pause, long enough to be its own kind of answer. "His," she finally said. "I went along with it. I shouldn't have. But it was his idea." Beverly didn't change expression. "Then we'd like the full timeline. When he approached you, what he told you the POA covered, what he said would happen if your father found out." My daughter looked at the legal pad in front of Beverly and then at the document she hadn't yet signed. "If I tell you everything," she said slowly, "what happens to Lawrence?" "That," Beverly said evenly, "is not our primary concern. Your cooperation is." She picked up the pen. What followed over the next 3 weeks was not dramatic. Drama is for people who haven't prepared. What I had was process. My daughter provided a full written account. The timeline confirmed that Lawrence had initiated the plan approximately 2 months after my surgery, when she was still running on fear and he was running out of options. He told her the power of attorney was essentially equivalent to ownership rights. He told her I probably wouldn't notice. He told her that by the time I did, the project would be profitable and everyone would benefit. He'd been wrong on all 3 counts. The accounting firm we brought in spent 9 days reconstructing the transaction trail. The $216,000 was recovered through a combination of direct restitution and asset liens placed against Lawrence's holding company. It was not easy. It was not fast, but it was complete. Lawrence's development project collapsed without the continued access to my accounts. His original investors, once the full picture emerged, withdrew. He retained an attorney and made a single attempt to claim that the transactions had been authorized through a verbal agreement with me. Beverly addressed that in one letter. The claim was abandoned within the week. The marriage, my daughter's marriage, became its own separate conversation, one I stayed out of. Not my decision to make. She knew where I stood. She knew what had happened. The rest was hers. 4 months after that early morning phone call, I was sitting in the same kitchen, same chair, different coffee. The leaves on the oak tree out back had turned the deep amber they get in October. The color they were the year I moved into this house, the year she was born. My daughter called. A different kind of call than the one in the spring. Shorter. Quieter. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "All right. I told myself I was protecting you. When I signed those things with Lawrence, when I let him use the POA, I told myself you'd be grateful eventually, that you'd see it was for your own good." She paused. "I've been thinking about that a lot. And it wasn't for your own good. It was easier than having a hard conversation with you. Or with him." I looked out the window at the yard, at the fence I'd put up the summer her mother got sick, so the dog we had then would have room to run. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Dad. I mean it." I believed her. That's the thing about 30 years of knowing someone. You can usually tell. We talked for a while about nothing particular. She asked about the business. I told her we'd picked up a new contract in Asheville, and that Sandra had finally agreed to take on a supervisor role she'd been resisting for 2 years. My daughter laughed at that. She knows, Sandra. Before she hung up, she said, "You should have told me you were still sharp. You should have shown me." "I did," I said. "You just weren't watching." There was a silence on her end that felt like recognition. Mercer Industrial Supply is still mine. 31 years and 47 employees in 3 warehouses and 1 framed photograph of 4 guys and a borrowed forklift. I go in 3 days a week now, which is the right amount. Dwight sends me the weekly reports. Beverly calls when something needs attention. Sandra runs the floor better than I did at her age. The power of attorney has been permanently revoked. My estate documents have been restructured, with Beverly's guidance. A properly formed LLC, a clear succession plan, everything in writing and in order, the things I should have done years ago before any of this was necessary. People ask me sometimes when I mention any of this obliquely whether I was angry, whether I wanted punishment. Mostly I wanted accuracy. I wanted the record to be correct. I wanted it understood that I had not faded, that the business I'd spent 3 decades building was not available for quiet reassignment while I was reading in the next room. And I wanted my daughter back, which is the part that took longer and cost more than any of the legal work. You can spend a lifetime building something, a company, a family, a reputation, and there will always be someone, sometimes someone you love, who decides the structure is available because you've grown quiet, because you've slowed down a little, because you trust. Don't stop trusting, but know what you've signed, know where your name is recorded, know who holds what and why, and if someone tells you the business has already been transferred, you know what to do. Check the deed. There's a photograph on the wall in my office. 4 men and a borrowed forklift, 1993, a rented garage in Knoxville. I've looked at that photograph 1,000 times over the years. Some mornings I look at it and feel proud. The morning after my daughter called to tell me what she and Lawrence had done, I looked at it and felt something else. Not anger, something quieter and more clarifying. The recognition that what I had built was worth defending, and that defending it was going to require me to be exactly the person I had always been, not diminished, not sentimental, not slow. What happened in those weeks was not complicated. At its root, a man who needed money looked for the easiest source he could access without consequences. He found it in my business accounts, through my daughter, through a document I had signed in a hospital bed when I was grateful to be alive. That is how these things usually begin, not with malice in the abstract, but with a specific weakness being identified and used. Lawrence did not take from me because he was evil. He took from me because he believed I wouldn't notice or wouldn't act if I did. That belief was the mistake. And my daughter, that part is harder to sit with still. She had told herself a story in which she was protecting me. That story allowed her to do something she knew was wrong. I've thought about that a great deal since. How often people who act badly are not lying to others so much as they are lying to themselves. The story she needed, that I was fading, that someone capable needed to take the wheel, made the rest feel justified. The story was false, but she had needed it to be true, and so she treated it as if it were. I don't say that to excuse her. Actions have weight regardless of the story behind them. $216,000 moved out of a business I had built over 31 years is not a misunderstanding. It is a choice. And choices accumulate into character, which is really what this whole thing was about. Not the money, not the legal filings, not even the business. It was about who each of us actually was when the pressure arrived. I found out who I was. I'd like to think I already knew, but you don't always know until it's tested. What got me through it wasn't anger, it was preparation. The years of careful documentation, the relationships with people like Beverly and Dwight who were competent and trustworthy because I had chosen carefully and treated them right. You reap what you build. Not in some mystical sense, but in the plain, practical sense that the structures you put in place before the crisis are the only ones available to you during it. I had built well. That mattered. And then there was the discipline of staying clear when everything in me wanted to be loud, to call my daughter back that first morning and demand an explanation, to confront Lawrence directly. The restraint wasn't passivity. It was the understanding that reaction without preparation is just noise, and I had spent 63 years learning that noise doesn't protect anything. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who looked at your age, your health, your quiet, I want you to hear this. Quiet is not absence. Patience is not weakness. And the most effective thing you can do when someone assumes you're finished is to let them believe it, right up until the moment the documents hit the table. Know what you've signed, know where your name is recorded, and take care of the people who take care of your work. Because when the moment comes, they are what you have. The rest has a way of correcting itself.